Welcome to Las Doctoras podcast, featuring your favorite profas bringing women and gender studies topics out of the university and onto the kitchen table.
I'm Christina, Chicana, Pinay, queer, Sha, Ella, traveler, Earth, Mama Bruja.
I'm Renee, Mexicana, Tejana, Chicana, she, her, ella, Mama Bruja scholar and scribe.
Together, we are the academic and word brujas creating revolutionary spaces outside the walls of the ivory tower to cast spells, read the ancient texts, and tell our sacred stories. We make this magic as an offering to our ancestors, to those who will come after us, and for the change we wish to see in the world. Salud!
Hello, welcome. We are actually, I don't know if we're gonna, what episode this will be, but we're here.
You just said it, right?
Yeah, we're excited to be here with an amazing guest, and we're gonna just jump right into it and ask her to introduce herself. Again, you can share name, pronouns, ancestors, and astrology, and then a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Welcome, Angie. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. So I'm Anjie Cho, and I'm she, her. My cultural background is I'm a Korean American, and I'm a fire dragon in the Asian system. I'm a Leo in Western astrology, and what else? I don't know about you, but I'm not accustomed to talking about myself so much.
It's okay. And I love the way that you are taking the questions and reframing them and putting them in your language. And it's so beautiful. I think the last thing we'd love to know for who's listening is what you bring, what your work is, like your calling, your passion, why,
Yeah, so I also call myself an architect and a feng shui educator. So I do a lot of work around people's homes, which I think is really connected to what you guys are talking about here. It's originally like connected to women's work, like the home and taking care of the home. So I work with people's homes, whether it's renovating or shifting the space as an architect or creating an energetic shift through feng shui. And then I also teach a lot of students now. That's primarily what I do is I train feng shui practitioners. So I write books about feng shui, I teach about feng shui, and I just like to work with people in their homes and taking it from an Eastern perspective.
Thank you so much. I think that was beautiful. The two words were architect and
an educator.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just like you guys, you're also both your own architects and educators too.
Oh my God. I love thinking of us as architects.
Totally.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. That's I love that. So I think we wanted to kind of get into how we were just talking about this before, like how we came to you. And
I was like, yeah, Renee, tell me, how did Anjie come to
I think I know I was in search of something many years, I think like 5 years ago now, in 2017 when I was, or maybe even sooner, I can't remember, around the time when I was writing my dissertation. And I was using my kitchen table as a desk, and it's just like something wasn't feeling right. And I was like, how do I create, and I didn't have a proper area, right? Like as like a work area, like how do I create something that feels good, because I need to be knee deep in all this writing. And I think that's when I thought, oh, maybe I don't even know how the thought came to me. I just thought feng shui could help. And so wanted to find, a practitioner that felt in alignment with a lot of my other, values and principles. And then finding your work. And then, we did a whole feng shui thing so that was my previous home in Long Beach. And I was just telling Christina.
Full circle. It's like when we met, I think.
Yeah, it was around that time. And I remember like all the tips that you had to be able to finish my dissertation, like even where in my computer to like save the dissertation on the desktop. And I remember you said to get red like sticky notes, and like where to like put the sticky notes. And it was, and like there was just a lot of things that were very helpful and useful in order to create positive energy, right? In order to be able to finish my dissertation, which I did. And then and definitely then when I came and I moved here 2 years ago, we were, you know, bare, and I said, let me do this before we put anything in here. And so again, I went to work with you again, where we were able to kind of lay out even just how furniture would kind of fit, you know. And again, because I had such a blank slate, it was easier to kind of do that. And I was telling Christina, because we recorded it, even now 2 years later, when I'm like moving things around, I still go back and like listen to it and reference it and kind of listen to what was you know, just not just like where you said things should go, but what was the purpose, right? And the bagua layout, right? And where what are the energies that are in that specific area. And I think that a few things that we wanted to know. Yeah. And then I told Christina about it, and then she's been listening to your podcast and, you know, going deep into that stuff.
I love the subtle adjustments that you always recommend in your podcast. And I took a brief course where I sent like the area I was living in and how to make this. And I think for me, I love the language you use. I find it to be clear. I don't know, and it speaks to something around how I'm creating flow, how I can create more of that invitation for, you know, certain energy to come into my life. And there's a beauty to this. There's a beauty to it that I'm really drawn to. So I'm so grateful. Thank you for bringing Anjie into our lives.
And I think it always has felt so approachable. I've always really appreciated your language around there's no like hard and fast rules, right? Because I think anytime we're, you know, trying to dive into especially something new, for example, right?
We are survivors of dogma,
right?
Dogmatic culture.
Exactly. So I was like, oh yeah. And I think you've always been really open and transparent about saying, so there's these things, but then you also have to kind of lean into your own energy and your own intuition and what feels good to you at the end of the day, knowing, you know, here's what the kind of framework is. And so I think that's what makes it so approachable. And I think that, again, for us, coming back to the work that we do, you know, again, both coming from, like you said, very dogmatic religions.
Yes.
But then we're at a point where we're trying to reclaim a lot of ancestral spirituality. And so we were even talking about, for us, so much of our spiritual rituals is about cleansing, right? And particularly limpias, right? And cleansing spaces. And so I think Feng Shui just made so much sense. It was like they were speaking the same language, right? Like brujeria and Feng Shui speak the same language in terms of understanding the energy of space and understanding the energy of of space and of
relationship, our body, something like
connection.
That, because we want to do that for ourselves, for our work, for our sleep, for our children, you know. It's all
and I think, what was the other thing I was gonna say? For me, I've noticed, because I'm a Cancer and so for me, I love being home. My home is like where it's my sanctuary. And I have I think since I first started working with you, you know, at least 5 years ago, I understood how important space was. Because I think sometimes people either told me or I thought like making my space look nice was a frivolous thing, right? Like that's just something that, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, but it was a luxury versus something that was something I really needed. And the more that I've leaned into that, the more I realized how much I need it. Like I need my desk space to look and feel nice if I'm going to come do work here, you know, or I need my home to look nice. So then when I come home, I feel relief from
Mhm.
the work. And so I think I've kind of shifted my ideas around that to where it's not frivolous, it's not a luxury, but it's actually like, well, even if it is a luxury,
It's your
like we all have right
meditation.
to luxury.
It's your mindfulness. It's your practice.
Yeah,
you know?
it is.
And I guess the last thing I want to say is I feel this is much in alignment with our last conversation with Minachi, where we were talking about our relationship with everything, you know, that we interact with. And so this feels very timely to have these conversations come.
Yeah.
One after the other. So
So
it's a lot of
that's
us.
I know that's just been how your work has resonated with us so much, and again, kind of feeling so much in alignment with your work. Which brings us to, of course,
and I want to just celebrate it. You have written a book.
Yeah.
This is, you know, this is where we're going.
Yeah, I know that's next on our manifest list.
Oh, wait. Before we get to that, I just have to say, Renee, like I remember when we first worked together,
Mm-hmm.
and how your life has evolved so much. And I remember also working with Christina in some of our mindful design workshops. But the thing is with you, like you talk about like investing in your home and how it's so important and how that's kind of like maybe frowned upon. But I've seen how actually your home has expanded with you, right? So when I first worked with you, you were completely overwhelmed by your home.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I remember thinking, oh no, I feel so bad for, because like it's like you were just like you were almost being swallowed by your home.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And with all of those things in your life, because I remember asking you, like, where can you sit and work? You're like, nowhere, basically.
Yeah.
And now you have your own effing office.
I do. Yeah.
And then when you came to me again, your life had like, and it was during the pandemic, like, you're like, Anjie, like, everything's like so different now. And I started this podcast and things are opening up, and I finished my dissertation and I was able to really shift things. And when you opened up your home space and expanded that also that aligned with your path, also opening up. So I see them completely in alignment. And it's a way of thinking of your home as not like a luxury, but it's a necessity, because if you don't have that space, how can you bloom if there's no room to do that?
I love that.
I just love the reminder. I feel like this is something we come back to over and over again, but we still need this reminder of actually what our needs are versus what our like wants or desires are. And
well, it's validation. I think again, there's so much, you know, people talk about limiting beliefs, and I think there is so much of that around the idea of what we deserve, like the space that we deserve. And I always feel like that idea of like, oh, we shouldn't have this because it's, you know, it's a lot of money or whatever it is. And like you said, a necessity, total necessity.
I mean, like I've had clients come to me where they're just completely overwhelmed, and literally maybe they've, like this one woman I'm thinking of, she had someone design this beautiful home for her, but when she moved in, there was nowhere to put furniture. Like they had designed it so there wasn't a place to put furniture, and like she couldn't put anything away or unpack her boxes. And so she was completely overwhelmed, stressed out, depressed, and her home was set up in such a way that it was impossible for her to be supported, to be relaxed. And she just can't, like every time she walked into her bedroom, she would see a pile of boxes because there was nowhere to put the things away, because it had been designed so like every wall had a window, and there was only one wall for a bed, and then the other walls had a bathroom, and then the closets were all like a mess. And you know, so it really matters. Like, and if you don't have a place to like have some quiet, to focus, to have space for yourself, or even like a quiet place to sleep, it's gonna wear down on you over time.
Yeah. You're like, now you're really thinking about like how do it's like setting yourself up for success, right? Like you said, versus that feeling of overwhelm. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
We're going to come back to this.
Yeah. And thank you for that reminder for sure. And tell us about your new book.
Well, thank you for asking. So I wrote a book about a decade ago, and it's called Holistic Spaces. And I'm just getting ready to launch my second book. I don't know when this is going to air, but it comes out April 11th. And it's called Mindful Homes. And I am so proud of it because I think you guys will understand too. It's like, when we first started on whatever we started on, and you're like, when I first started, I was like, okay, I'm really good at giving people tips. So I'm going to give like a listicle of like 10 ways to do this. And I'm really good at being bossy and telling people what to do and being very precise, and also not like putting anything vulnerable in it. Right. So just like, people don't need to hear about me. People don't need to hear anything weird. They just need to hear how to do things, and they'll like me. So it's kind of like that feeling of wanting people to like me, wanting people to like how can I be useful to them? So what can they take away from me and go do? And so what I created was like a situation which was helpful for people to start to fix their lives. Because I was coming from a place thinking that I also had to, the only way that people would appreciate me was to fix things for people, because I was good at it.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And then now, though, like, a decade later, I have more confidence. I have more gray hair. I've gotten older, and I've taught a lot of people and had a lot of clients and worked with a lot of people. And I see, and I've also meditated a lot and worked on myself. So I can see that that was very helpful. And of course, I needed to go through that. But my definition of feng shui has really changed, where I understand that fixing things, it's helpful. But really, that's not going to solve any problems unless you look at the underlying issues and you see what's inside and look at your heart. So I'm challenging people to redefine feng shui as a mindfulness practice, as a spiritual practice, instead of thinking, how can I move this to make cash? Versus, what is happening in my home, and what's my relationship with my home, and how does it reflect on how I value myself?
So good.
Because they're both are important, right? Like, we live in reality. We live on this earth. There's an earth element, but there's also the spiritual element, and it's the yin and yang. You need both. Just like you need some level of structure and dogma, but you also can flip the whole thing over and be gentle and open to saying, well, maybe I was totally wrong, or what do you think, right? So it's yes, and it's like this Eastern point of view is yes and, not either or.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's exactly what we do with people when they're like, I need to finish my dissertation, or I need to do this. And we're like, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with your relationship with your writing. We're like, yes, you will complete that if you can, let's go here first.
Yeah. Well, I like how you say there's a difference between saying, oh, what can I move to get cash, versus what is my relationship to my home, or what is my relationship to money, right? Like, why it's getting to the root of the cause versus just kind of addressing the symptom, right? You're right. That's exactly what we do with people who are trying to finish something, and we're like, okay, but let's talk about your relationship to writing before you have to write the dissertation, and how can we restructure your joy in writing, and then the joy in those things that are not so fun, right, will come too. So that, again, that is very similar language.
The other element I love is that, and I'm hoping you're going to speak to this, I imagine it is that we've learned that even though we can give people 10 things that they can do to help themselves, our message has much more resonance if we talk about our journey and our process.
Yes,
so
exactly. That's what I try to teach my students. I'm like, look, I say, okay, I don't know if you guys will agree with this as educators, but I tell them, like, okay, to be honest with you, because they always start the certification program saying, what books should we buy? And I say, well, to tell you the truth, I've never read any feng shui book, because I just followed my teachers around, and I experienced this, and this is the same as with meditation. Someone can't teach you what your experience is. So I tell them, like, I'm not going to give you a checklist of 10 things. Yeah, I'll put that on a blog because I'm like, this is like for everybody, but you've come to me to become a healer, a feng shui practitioner. So no one, you will not be able to practice this or help other people until you understand it in your own heart. So it's not about memorizing, like having a checklist of every single thing you should look at, because if you want to do that, go to Barnes and Noble and buy a book. But what you can't replace is your own experience of it. So we always say, like, I'm going to teach you things, but you should practice it before you pass it on.
And deep resonance here, I think, for us, because we are so cerebral sometimes, and so with our children and with our inner niñas, our young selves, we're having to say, okay, Mija, like, we can trust our intuition.
Yeah.
We can come back to our bodies, our home, Yeah.
Yeah. And that's that shift from if we just follow A, B, and C, we'll accomplish it, versus you can follow A, B, and C, but it may not make sense because, I'll give you an example, specific example. So when we first looked at my home right before, when it was like, there was nothing here, and we talked about furniture placement, like how to put furniture in different places. And the office was a big one for me. And I had an L-shaped desk, and we talked about that. And then I remember you saying, eventually, if you wanted to invite a different type of energy, you can angle the desk a certain way. And so I eventually got rid of the L and I angled the desk. And I think I sat with that for a while, and it didn't feel good. Like, at some point I was like, this is not working. And so I just kind of put it at a straight. And I was thinking, like, oh, but Angie said to angle it. And I was like, no, she also says that I can follow my own intuition, right? On what feels good for me. And if that didn't work, then it's okay to, like, try different things. And that's what I hear you saying, is that yes, you can have all these rules, but ultimately you have to, it's like trial and error, right? That it's learning through experience, and learning and feeling into what feels good, and not being, because again, we can follow those rules and it just feels like resistance, right? It creates resistance.
And it's also like getting stuck in that. For me, it ties into kind of getting stuck with that Western, more masculine point of view, where one of my teachers said, like, the Western point of view is kind of like you kill it, dissect it, and figure out what's going on. Whereas the Eastern point of view is keeping things alive and observing and being open to shift, and so it's kind of a disservice. Like, sometimes, like, people actually I got asked this question twice recently: where should I put my altar? So if I was going to write a blog post for anybody, I would say, okay, you can put your altar in the helpful people area. Done, right? But if I'm working with a student, or I'm teaching a student to become a practitioner, or I'm working with someone I care about, or someone that's hired me, I would say, well, what are you doing at your altar? Like, first of all, like, a Buddhist practitioner, sometimes like a Vajrayana practitioner, would maybe sit in front of it and meditate, facing it. Someone from a different culture or a different practice may have it just sitting there, and they never sit in front of it. I don't know. Like, and what is the purpose? Like, is it honoring your ancestors? Is it for protection? Is it to inspire your practice? And so once I have all those answers, plus I look at your actual home situation, like, because I could say put in your helpful people area, but maybe they have a bathroom in their helpful people area. You know what I mean? Like, so we can really fine tune things once we understand that it doesn't have to fit like that rigid dogma of solidifying it and making it not move.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck with what you just said about like the Western dissect, like this like white culture dissect, kill,
Kill,
versus like
dissect, see how it works after it's dead.
creating life.
I,
I'm just like, damn, that's it. That's
yeah,
real.
I thought about plants. And so I think that people like, so I always say my mom is like, a plant witch because I swear she will bring plants back from the dead, right? Like you think, oh God, this, and she's like, no, 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 no. We can, she'll take a clipping and all of a sudden it's this thriving plant, and so in my new home, I've been trying to like lean more into like, let's have some plants in this house. And I'm, it's not innate to me. And so I know it's, and so sometimes I see things, I'm like, oh God, it's dying. And then I put just a little bit of water or, maybe, oh, my mom was like, oh, it probably just needs a sun. Like just go put in the sun for a day and then you can bring it back inside. And so it's kind of, that's what when I thought of like, instead of just giving up because a plant is dying, instead say, oh, how can I address its needs? Right? How can I
how do you address the needs of a person or a thing or your home or a student?
Yeah, which I think has me always rearranging my house. Like, I always say like I have to kind of live into things to see how they work. And like my kids' room, I feel especially, I'm always trying to reorganize because they're, if I realize that it's hard for them to clean up their space, I'm like, oh, it's not them. Something in the space isn't working. That's not allowing to make it easy for them to clean up. So then I go through and like change everything.
Well, that's so true. Like I was just, because another question I get a lot is like, one I got recently was, I have a problem. I'm really disorganized and I have a problem putting things back in the right place. And can feng shui help? So number one, like, clutter is really not the same as feng shui. And so I asked one of my graduates who's a professional organizer, and she really said it, just what you said, is she said, if you're not putting it back in that place, that means that's not the place it belongs. So we have this like kind of, in the West, we have this perception that we are bad people or we do something wrong. And instead of like, are we creating the space to allow something to support us in the best way possible?
Yeah.
I think there's this perfection too that we should know what to do. And sometimes I have a hard time giving myself permission or celebrating the energy it takes to create these spaces. And so I love how like when we meet the needs of our family, of our children in our home space, the energy of letting things go, bringing things in is an artwork, right? A practice, a spiritual discipline, even self-care, community care. I just want to like let that like really come into my heart, instead of thinking of it as time that takes away from my productivity, or yada 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 yada.
Yeah, that's our perspective on it, because we can, just like we can decide something, we could decide that this thing is harming us, or this is like their time, this is time like taking away from my time. It's only our perspective that is it's our perspective that's creating that unhappiness, I guess, right? I mean, it's really easy to do that. I was like kind of in a bad mood earlier today, and I was like, oh my God, I have to like open the door for everyone. Why is everyone in my way? And I have to go pee. And I was getting really grumpy, and it's just like the world is just functioning around me. It's my decision to be in a bad mood, or I can reposition myself. I can look at it from like another perspective, like even me trying to tell you I had a bad day and I had to open the door for someone, like that sounds ridiculous already now that I've said it out loud, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like,
I love that though. It's a kind of like being grateful, like for the privileges of being able. I recently broke my leg. Long story, but I'm walking now, and I'm so grateful for just the ability to get up and open the door.
Yeah. It gives you a different perspective.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the, because you had sent us like a little overview of the book, and we were resonating so much with some of the things, and We really liked, you said, feng shui is a meeting of heaven and earth, the esoteric with the mundane, the magical with the practical, and how one can begin to see art in their everyday life. And I think that's exactly what we're saying, right? Is like shifting that idea of being able to see the beauty, you know, in everything, right? And like you said, the mundane, and us, we're all about the magical and the practical, right? Like how do we make, we talk about it as like practical magic, right? And I think that's exactly what feng shui is, right? It's like practical magic, but maybe speak more a little bit to this notion of like of that, right? Like that feng shui is a meeting of heaven and earth.
Well, something that you guys said earlier that kind of ties into this is when you were talking about like a student that may be having trouble stuck finishing their dissertation or their paper and then taking it back. So it's like, one, you can't get stuck in your head, just think, which is kind of like the heaven element, just thinking, I can't do this, I can't do this. You do also have to take it back and say like, what is stopping you? But then at the same time, they need the mundane, they need to write the paper. Right. Right. It's like you, so either you can get stuck in just like pushing yourself on the earthly realm to just kind of like be as mundane as possible, or maybe you just write something without putting your heart into it, or you get stuck like just ruminating about it in your head. So so similarly, feng shui is, I think, so helpful for people because it's your environment. So people find it very non-invasive in a lot of ways. Like I can start, like they're like, okay, I could like you said, like Renee, like I can try this position of my desk and see how it feels, because I'm always telling people, you know what, you can move it back, just try it. And or don't try it, it's okay. So you could kind of like move things around. It's very non-invasive and it doesn't really go so deep into the heart right away, but it starts to make subtle shifts around you. And it's not like poking needles in you. You're not eating something. You don't have to change a lot. And it's also in your home, so it's pretty private. In this case, well, we're talking about feng shui for the home. So that's like the kind of the mundane aspect, and an earth aspect is like it's actually happening on earth. It's like a practical thing, right? It's like where I position my desk, or the door is right here. You could see it, you could touch it. And then the heaven aspect is the invisible. It's like it could be all of your emotions connected to it. It could be the invisible meanings or symbolism that connect to that area, and also your experience around it, but then also simply like how the chi or the energy, the life force energy, moves through a space. Like we could even go back to that door example. So in feng shui, doors represent your mouth, your voice, and it's also like a portal, right? Like it's your connection to like the outside world, your front door. So there's this beautiful Jewish prayer that I learned recently when I went to my first bar mitzvah, and at a very super reformed synagogue. And they said, may the doors of this synagogue be wide enough to like welcome anyone who seeks support and love, something along those lines. But may it be narrow enough to shut out prejudice. And so many different cultures have this metaphor of the door. And I was teaching a workshop recently where there's a woman that had moved into her childhood home, and she was taking care of an aging parent. And she said, you know, the front door, it's like so beautiful. It's old, it's carved wood, but she's like, it literally like doesn't shut. It needs a lot of TLC. It needs so much work. And I just let her keep talking and talking. And finally she kind of just said like, I really want to like take care of it. I really want to bring it back to how beautiful it really is, but it's not my door to fix. So there's so much like of this, like something that's completely mundane, like a door, could have so much meaning, right? It's like a door is a threshold.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah,
going on with your front door?
I know. I'm trying to think.
I was thinking about your neighbor's front door actually. Through this window is their front door,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's really interesting. It's on the side.
It is interesting.
What do you mean the window is the front door?
So this window right here
Mm-hmm.
points at their front door.
Oh, their front is their front door. Is it
On
that
the
your
side of the
windows?
Their front door is on the side of their house.
Oh,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
again, it's not your front door to fix.
No, it's
Yeah.
not your property, but it is interesting because it may feel a little bit invasive for their front door to be facing you.
Yeah, my husband has talked about possibly bringing our fence up a little bit so that
Mhm.
there's a little bit more privacy.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think. I think it kind of goes to my kids' room as well. But let's see, my front door. Interestingly, so I really like my front door. My husband really wanted this nice, fancy, like we didn't get like a screen door. It's just like glass door, and then we
Mhm.
have the regular wood door.
Okay.
But it looks
Oh,
really
a
nice.
glass. So a glass like door, like to protect from insects and things like that.
Yes,
and heat.
and then we have the inside door, but like, and everybody always compliments us on it. And then I noticed like a couple neighbors down, they got the same door. I thought it was pretty
And your
interesting.
last door, didn't the Long Beach door face the side?
I did.
It did, and
Yeah.
I remember you told me because we often came in through like the back door, like the kitchen door, and you were like, make sure you come through the front door, often because again that energy, and you said to put a bell on the back door, so then you're like there, yeah. And so I always had a bell in the back door, and I had to be really conscious because I would park in the back.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, let's make sure I come through the front door.
Yeah, because usually I tell people like to kind of factor it into their routine. Like maybe you always get the mail through the front door, or you always use the front door to walk the dogs or something. But I remember because a lot of California houses have like the door facing the side, and that means it's a little bit harder for the chi to find you.
Yeah, this one is a front door, straight up.
Okay.
Well,
There's a lot of
yeah, you have better chi. And I remember, Christina, when we looked at your floor plan, didn't you have like your front door, like the house that we looked at was all glass and
all
it was
glass
straight
and
into the living room?
two
Oh,
doors,
double
two
sliders.
double sliders. Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting to work through that. And then my fireplace was in the middle, and that was like at the center. It needed some green, right? It needs some earth and some grounding. Now I'm actually in California and living in a studio, so my front door is the door to everything, and there's no back door. So I don't know if we're there yet.
Yes, I think we're there. I think you need to ask
I want to
some
come back.
specific questions. So I mean, I'll say for like it's because she has to use it as sleeping, living, work,
totally.
kid.
Yes, I have a child.
Yeah.
And I live there because it's next to the ocean, so I wanted that, and I was willing to do that exchange. I also imagined us living our lives a lot outside, but I've been there a lot because of my healing of my leg. And so I don't know. So at the moment, or for most of this last few weeks, it's been a place, because I've only been there for a couple months, it's been a place for rest. And then more recently, though, because I'm working from home, I would like a desk. I would like a workspace, And so I just got a desk yesterday that I'm going to set up to be by the windows. But I'm kind of overwhelmed by the whole process. It literally is like 300 square feet, inclusive of a kitchen and a bathroom. I don't even know where to begin to be able to make sure that I can sleep, right? Because I think that's probably in the end, I can work outside the house, but I can't sleep, outside my house. And yet also, I don't know, and have it be like multi-purpose. And maybe I'm trying for too much, actually, as I say this right now, because I can work somewhere else, if I need to.
Well, so okay. Well, it's good, number one, that you already understand that like you chose you chose to get a smaller place in order to have something else, and something else that fulfills you, being by the water.
Yeah.
And of course, plans don't always happen the way you wanted to. Like as you see, I have I got stitches here because I fell, and
oh my goodness,
and things happens, and I hurt my leg or my hip too, so my mobility has been a bit off as well. So have you been able to rest there, like, since you've been homebound?
Yeah, actually, it's been a wonderful place to both rest and to welcome support. People have this
Really been
last couple
stepping
months,
up.
people
Yeah.
have been coming in. And so it has served that purpose.
And surprisingly enough, as small as it is, it feels very welcoming.
people, you came over the other day as like a rest, you know, a kind of like a
like
getaway.
I felt really good resting in there.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a misconception that people need to have a lot of space in order to have a good home, because I think that's and that's actually like a kind of American ideal, right? Like people in Europe, people in Japan, like live in much smaller places, and people all over the world live in much smaller homes. And I think when people ask me like the question about feng shui for a small space, I think there's a lot of of one is doing the best you can with what you have. Two, not judging yourself for it, because I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, but I spend most of the time in my bedroom. I might as well be in a studio apartment, like so it's totally okay. And I think one thing that I do think is important to emphasize, though, is that to understand that your space is a multifunctional space, and having some kind of separation if you need it. So basically, like in feng shui, we'll say like if you're working at your desk and you're staring at your refrigerator, you'll be hungry all the time.
Oh yeah.
Or if you're working at your desk and you're like looking at your bed all the time, you'll find ways to get sleepy and think, oh, I'm just gonna go lay down for a second.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you're in bed staring at your desk, it's very easy to think like, oh God, I forgot to send that email. I just have to open my computer up and look. So because you have no physical boundaries, how do you start to create energetic boundaries in your space, which can be based on rituals? It could be like, I make my bed every day, and or when it's work time, I have my workout, and I make a little desk, just like for a meal. Like if you eat in your bed, it's not very like fun, right? And it's pretty kind of sad if you're like eating in bed, watching TV in bed, working in bed, which I've done like in my 20s. But maybe your dining room table, and I told this to Renee too, I think your dining room table while you're working on it is your desk. So get like a desk blotter, make it your desk.
Yeah.
Don't make it a dining room table or a coffee table. Put yourself in command if you can. And then when office hours are closed, you roll it up, put it away, turn off the computer.
Yeah.
That,
Turn it off.
like turn it off. But like think about it, like how easy. Okay, so if you're laying in bed,
turning off the internet before I go to sleep, actually, because it's also in the same room with us, and I think, oh no, I can't do that. So I put it on the switch because it's connected, and I just turn it off before I go to bed.
But also like shutting down your computer, like you'll think twice about getting up and answering that email. You're like, oh, I have to wait for my computer to come back on again. So like creating these energetic ritual-based boundaries, like rolling up putting all your computer things, your desk away, and then setting up a nice like dining table for you and your kid. Like, so you're creating a lot of ceremony. And you know what? Like we have enough time. It only takes like a few extra minutes. Just like, I used to think, oh my God, I have no time to eat. But when you sit down and eat, it only really takes like 5 minutes, right?
But having that flow and kind of like this clear, I don't want to say boundary or step. I want to say something much more like,
well, she says energetic. I like how energetic rituals as a means to, when there's not those physical boundaries, right, the
Right.
walls, then you can create these energy. I think that is going to resonate with so many people, because I
Yeah.
think so many people, even if they have space, they still tend to use spaces in a multi-purpose, right? Like for me, it was very intentional when I bought the house. I was like, one bedroom is going to be an office no matter what. But not everybody does that, so they end up having any space in the house be working as a desk. And then, and like you said, then it leans into like, you can work all the time.
Well,
right,
and that's,
because if you're not
yeah.
making that like definitive, okay, I'm done.
I never turn the computer off. I just
Me
never.
neither.
Oh man, that's
Well,
good.
and you know, and that's when the pandemic started and a lot of people, everyone was working
Yeah.
from home, right? The biggest feedback I got was everyone's like, I'm just working all the time.
Yeah.
Because there was no physical boundaries. They had
Yeah.
physical boundaries they were accustomed to, and they didn't know, they weren't equipped to create those to maintain those boundaries in an energetic way. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to create those, because just like, you know how they say, like we're not equipped to multitask, and we're actually doing like one task at a time.
Mhm.
And each time we switch between tasks, we're becoming more speedy, more frantic, we're losing our
Mm.
focus. That's the same thing that you do in your home. Every time you see, like, okay, you're like at your desk, and then you see the refrigerator and you're like, oh, I need to like buy that grocery thing. And then you're looking at your bed, and then you're looking at this, and you're like, oh, I should get up and like clean my windows, or oh, I think I have to go to the bathroom again. Like you're setting your environment up to actually multitask, because you're creating a multifunctional space. So by simplifying your environment, by just simply saying like, this is no longer a dining room table, now it's my desk.
Yeah.
And I've
It's good.
given myself visual cues, as well as like movements, and maybe like, just like getting up, and you also, in the pandemic, everyone was in their pajamas, like getting up, changing, even though you don't leave your house, like wearing something nice. All those things start to shift the chi.
I think it's super important. I think about how much in the night I'll think of things to do, and I won't turn my computer on or go to it. I will try to write it in a notebook, but I still think that's probably because of the space, and I'm not creating those energetic boundaries, that it's all kind of there, and it's just
it's
coming
all
in.
just like, it's all like swirling around.
Yeah.
And then you're not really able to focus on any one task efficiently either, right? Because you're still you're always thinking of something else, versus like being in what you are doing. I wanted to ask, because I think this is a if I were to like take anything away from Feng Shui, I think you said command. And I'd love for you to just speak to that for anyone who's kind of learning about this for the first time, because I think that's, if there's one thing you can do, it's to do the command with your desk, with your bed, with whatever. So tell us about that.
Sure. So the commanding position is one of the most important principles in Feng Shui, and it dictates or gives guidance on how you position yourself in your environment. And so on a mundane level, what that means is, when you're at your bed, desk, or stove, which are your three most important areas, your bed, it represents you. Your desk represents your career and your path in life. And your stove represents how you nourish yourself, which directly relates to your financial stability, your livelihood, and your resources. So you want to be able to position yourself when you're laying in bed, sitting at your desk, or standing at your stove cooking, so that you can see the door to the space without being directly in line with the door. So usually that means you're a diagonal position. And ideally, you want to have a solid wall to support you. And again, you don't want to be directly in front of the door. So like on a very like an example I like to use is like, where would the CEO sit in an office? He would not be right by the front door. That's where the admin person is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not he or she, they're not dealing with like the people coming in and out. They're at the very back corner office overseeing everything.
They're best facing out, not up against a wall, which is,
Yes. Because when you're up against the wall, like or when you're staring at a wall, you can't see further. So on a metaphorical level, it means that you're not able to see what energy is coming to you. You can't see what's coming in through the door. You're blocked, and perhaps you're even purposely turning away and afraid to look at what the energy is coming towards you. And when you simply change your perspective, right? Take a new view on life, which simply can just mean turning around.
Uh-huh.
It means like, I am willing to look and see. I'm not scared to see what's coming towards me. In fact, I want to be prepared. So on a physiological level, when your back is to the door, your old mind is in a fight or flight response because it can't see what's coming towards you. You could be surprised. You have you have to use like your other senses. You can't use your eyes, which is like humans are primarily frontally focused because we've evolved to be able to see subtle movements. So we feel the most comfortable and stress-free when we can see the door. So we have so many stresses in our lives now in modern life. Like your like email will ding, you'll get a text, like, we have to do like 20 million things at once. We don't need another stressor to worry if someone's going to creep in behind us and surprise us. And like another example is like, where would you want to sit in a restaurant? Like you don't want to sit right in front of the door in the grass. Like, especially like say you're waiting for a friend, Christina, you're waiting for Renee to meet you at the restaurant. You don't sit with your back towards the door right in front of it. You would probably, if you could pick any seat in the house, probably the back corner where you could see when Renee's coming in. You have the support of the wall behind you. You could see everything that's happening in that beautiful restaurant. You could see all the people. You can see all the beauty around you. And no one would go, I mean, someone might, but generally most people wouldn't go and sit in a restaurant to stare at the wall, right?
Yeah. So I've had one house in my life, I guess, which I'm so privileged to have houses I've tried out, where I had the space to put my desk in the CEO position to face the door, like this is, Most of the time I've not had that space. And so I know there are things, right, to help with command position when you can't physically like put that desk so it faces or the bed, and I think mirrors, right, are involved. And
yeah. So like even me, like, so I live in a New York City apartment and I don't have my own room for my home office. And I am not positioned so I can see the door because I just don't have the space. So you do the best you can with what you have. So I've set up a mirror behind my desk so I can, so one, I'm not staring at a wall. So it's like just functioning with a brick wall in front of you. So I've put a mirror behind my desk. So that my view is expanded, meaning that I can move forward in my career. I can expand my career. And then I've also set up a small convex mirror so that I can see the door behind me. So if you're like at your stove, which is very common, you can't move your stove, or you're laying in bed and there's no way for you to put yourself in the commanding position, you can place a mirror so that when you're laying in bed and you're like sitting up with your back against the headboard, you can see the reflection of the door in the mirror. Or when you're standing cooking at your stove, you can see the primary entrance when you're standing like in this mirror. And it's actually so important, especially for the stove, because like, when we're cooking, it's alchemy. We're transforming food into nourishment, right? And when you're stirring that food, it's like you're doing magic, right? And you want to stir into that food the best chi that you can. You don't want to put fear, stress, turning away from the situation, anxiety into
Mhm.
that. You don't want to put that chi into your food. You want to put the best you can, and you want to be like in control. You want to be able to see what's in front of you, and then when you can see what's coming to you, you have the choice to react or to respond in how you want to respond instead of just reacting, right?
From that, that survival instinct,
Exactly.
thinking, yeah.
I love that. I remember we talked about my stove here. Just creative ways to create mirrors is I have a stainless steel teapot that serves
Yes.
as a mirror, so I don't actually have to put like a mirror, but it has a reflection, so then I can see, because my back door kind of meets the stove. But
that's so cool.
yeah,
I love that.
So I think, and that's and I think that's I love all that stuff, because I love me some good home decor. But then I think I'm also somebody that when I have home decor, I'm very intentional. Like I don't necessarily just get random artwork, or I don't necessarily like everything in my home has so much intention. And I think that that's what feng shui at the end of the day does, is everything in your home, there's an intention there, right? And the more intention you have, again, that positive energy is going to come back. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but there was one thing I wanted to share. So when I remember when we first talked for this house, we were going to cut down some trees, and you had suggested to kind of talk to the spirits of the trees and then keep a little bit of those trees, and then kind of create a space to then offer them back into the space. So I remember when we cut, my kids were all really sad about cutting the trees down. They just weren't going to work for us. So, but they loved it. They loved going and kind of talking to the trees. And so we took like leaves and stuff from each of the trees that we cut. And then it took a while for me to be able to kind of even do anything with the yard. But last summer, we kind of created a little altar space. And then I had held on to all those leaves, and I offered it back. And that altar space is thriving. Like there are flowers, like calla lilies growing. There's like all kinds of stuff. And so to me, that was just telling again of that intention, right? And that communing with the space. And that there's just, that to me is like proof that there's just so much to be said about the energies of the space and nature.
Well, let me just say like you actually, what you did is you're kind of acknowledging the spirit of the tree. And you said like, I'm going to cut you down, but I'm going to create a new home for you. And then when you offered the new home, is you're saying you still have a place on this land with me. So I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah.
Two things. I wanted to say that, growing up maybe in a home where I didn't feel like it was meant for me, I guess, like maybe the altar was the TV or something like that, or, and also with not maybe as much class privilege, because sometimes creating a home can feel overwhelming to me. And this gives me a clear move forward, an approach to actually creating a home that actually works for me and the things that I love. And so I'm very grateful for the interactions that we've had before. The last thing I would love to create, I know we need to wrap up, but I'd love to hear just a little bit more about the book. And so maybe in closing, what else can you tell us about, mindful homes?
Yes.
Well, let me see. I think one of the most important things that I learned from writing this book is that feng shui, I guess it circles back to what we started about, is that feng shui is more than just moving something around so you could fix your life. And it's really a deeper practice in an invitation for everyone to look at their own cultural lineage as well. Like you talked about the Olympia, like I have a graduate who's Mexican, and we did a podcast with her where she talked about Olympia and how that, and it actually resonated a lot with my business partner, Laura, who's Italian. How like all this wisdom with the household was connected to the feminine side of the family, and how like there's all this like the witchiness of it. And so really finding whether that's through the lens of feng shui, but finding like what is your cultural lineage and honoring that, no matter like like Christina was talking about, like growing up in a home maybe that wasn't so supportive. And my husband has this really this story about like he grew up in a home where his mother designed it, and it was good for her, but it wasn't good for him as a child, right? Like he said there were so many doors and none of them had locks, and how unsafe that is for a child, right? And we to circle back to the doors again, right? And I know I bet like you two are like very protective of your doors. Like he was saying, our home now, we're in New York City, there's a security card at the door downstairs. There's only one door to get into the space, and we know how to get. We have it locked. Right?
Jaguar's really good about locking the door before we go to bed.
Yeah.
And so again, the door is like this connection to the outside world. So even though we may have not benefited from the homes that we grew up in, it does give us the strength to kind of maybe work with some challenges that give us a way to look at how instead we prefer to have our homes support us. And so maybe we do need like safer homes, and what did a not safe home feel like for us as children. And so these are important parts of our cultural background. Like how did we grow up? How did that support our parents? How did that not support us? And how can we shift that story about our home?
I love it. And I'm sure there's so much more to say. But we do want to wrap up and just maybe ask you to share where people can find you, how they can work with you. I know you put so much out into the community, so please tell us.
So you can follow me on Instagram at Anjie Cho, or you could visit my feng shui school, mindfuldesignschool.com. And my business partner, Laura Morris, and myself, we have a podcast called the Holistic Spaces Podcast, all about feng shui. And then, my book, Mindful Homes, or Holistic Spaces, my first book.
Yay!
Thank you, Anjie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Intro and outro song is called Foreign Fog by The Corner House, a band that features our dear friend, Danelia Arechiga.